We live in strange times, and 2023 has been a very bizarre year. We saw quest for Palestine and open calls for genocide.
When we say we want Palestine to be free, it's from the river to the sea.
We saw Westerners celebrating the slaughter of Jews back in a country run by Islamic terrorists and all of a sudden becoming fans of Osama bin Laden.
So I just read A Letter to America, and I will never look at life the same.
That escalated quickly.
If you say men can't be women, that's hate speech. But if you say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that's free speech. And people who love to fight for the rights of indigenous people are calling Israel colonialist, having no right to have a country in their homeland. And these same people can't differentiate between genocide and casualties of war.
Both Israel and Hamas have engaged in genocidal and murderous rhetoric.
And this madness isn't just on the left among the moronic woke mob, it is also on the right. We saw Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, and Patrick Bet-David become apologists for sex traffickers and renowned internet pimps.
I do not believe that he is guilty of the crimes that are being laid at his feet right now.
Who can forget the famous call for Christians to build bridges with people who want them dead?
I deserve to be killed because I left Islam and became a Christian.
According to Islamic law, an apostate like you would be killed, yeah.
But before this recent descent into madness, we had the subtle ones happening in the growing online movement of the Red Pill community. Suddenly they believe Islam is better for society, while most Muslim countries wallow in abject poverty.
The women seem to submit more to their men than I see Christians do, more so. That's what I appreciated about them.
Never in my 20-something years of living in a country that's over 50% Muslim did I ever imagine that people in the West will find Islam appealing because of its treatment of women. That's more ridiculous than quest for Palestine. If you're a Muslim watching this, I want you to know that I don't hate you. I'm not doing this to spite you. By the end of this video, you may have forgotten that I said this and hate me, but we need to have an honest conversation about your ideology. Let's examine Islam doctrine on women and marriage and see how Islam treats women in marriage and why Sneeko is so flawed by it.
That's why I like it. It's just there's one creator, and also they're really strict on their beliefs on masculinity and femininity.
The Quran stipulates a waiting period for divorced women to observe before they can remarry. Surah 2 verse 228 states, divorced women must wait 3 monthly cycles before they can remarry. And also Surah 33 verse 49 also states, "O believer, if you marry believing women and then divorce them before you touch them, you will have no waiting period for you to count." These two verses show that the waiting period has to do with having sexual contact within marriage. So if a man marries a woman, sleeps with her and divorces her later, she is to wait for 3 menstrual cycles before she can remarry. If no intercourse occurs within the marriage, then no waiting period is required. Why is this important? Well, when these two verses were revealed to Muhammad, his followers had some follow-up questions. According to authentic Muslim sources, these followers asked the Prophet about the waiting period for other categories of women, and thus there was a follow-up revelation found in Surah 65 verse 4. As for your women past the age of menopause, in case you do not know, their waiting period is 3 months, and those who have not menstruated as well. Yes, there you have it. The Quran, the final revelation of Allah, according to Islam, endorses marriage with prepubescent girls. It even prescribes a waiting period for them, which also means that it is perfectly fine to consummate the marriage and divorce a prepubescent girl. And you don't have to take my word for it. Here is from the Muslim apologist Muhammad Hijab.
If you look just at the Quran, you will get the indication that you can have sexual intercourse with a 5-year-old.
Now, he isn't endorsing marriage with prepubescent girls here. Instead, he's saying that if you follow just the Quran, you will conclude that Muslims are allowed to have sexual contact with these girls. So what else must they follow to prevent this from happening? Well, they must follow the example the great prophet presented, who deemed it moral to marry a 6-year-old and consummate the marriage when she was 9. And this is the standard Islamic narrative. You can find it in all the narrations of Muhammad's life, also known as the Sahih Hadiths. Among Sunni Muslims, 85% of the Muslim population, this fact about their final prophet isn't up for debate. And Surah 33 verse 21 proudly declares, "Indeed, in the messenger of Allah, you have an excellent example for whoever has hope in Allah and the last day and remembers Allah often." Yes, that's from the Quran, but you don't have to take it from me. Take it from renowned celebrated Muslim apologists.
Moment a lady reaches puberty and a gent reaches puberty, they can marry.
So you think that having sex with a 9-year-old is justified?
Yeah. You know what precocious puberty is?
Yes, I do.
Could a man have a marriage to a 5-year-old consummated if she started precocious puberty?
If she starts showing signs of physical maturity then yes.
Sharia law on child marriage has been consistent with the practice of Muhammad. Child marriage is a common practice in many Muslim countries, which have vehemently fought against new legislation that tries to abolish it, calling them un-Islamic. Surah 4 verse 34, referring to women, states, "As for those from whom you fear rebellion, admonish them and banish them to beds apart and scourge them." And Surah 38 verse 44 states that the Prophet Job was commanded by Allah to beat his wife, saying, "Take in your hand a bundle of grass and strike your wife with it and do not break your oath." And Allah continues, "We truly found him patient. What an excellent servant he was. Indeed, he constantly turned to Allah." Yes, this is consistent with Muhammad's conduct in the hadiths. Several Sahih hadiths show Aisha, Muhammad's child bride, recounting how Muhammad painfully shoved her on the chest. Granted, other Sahih hadiths also report Aisha saying that Muhammad never hit a woman. I guess then she didn't remember that there was a time that he hit her. Umar, the second rightly guarded caliph of Islam and professional wife beater, is also reported to have struck Muhammad's wife and his own wife. He even told a man to beat his wife after she tried to stop him from having his way with a slave girl. When it came to Muhammad's decision on the matter, he appears to self-contradict. One minute he says, "Don't beat your wife." The next minute he says, "Beat her, but not severely." In his farewell sermon, the Prophet said, "Now, O people, you have a right over your wives, and they have a right over you. You have the right that they should not cause anyone whom you dislike to tread on your bed, and that they should not commit any open indecency. If they do, then Allah permits you to shut them in a separate room and beat them, but not severely. And if they abstain from evil, they have the right to their food and clothing in accordance with the custom. Treat them well, for they are like domestic animals." Hey, Chineke. Hi. "For they are like domestic animals with you and do not possess anything for themselves. Yes, thus saith the Prophet of Allah." I mean, who decides that she is being indecent or has abstained from evil? Mind you, she is to be deprived of food and clothing until she mends her ways. In the hadiths, Aisha was narrated to have said, "I have not seen any woman suffer as much as the believing women. Look, her skin is greener than her clothes." Why Muslims can argue amongst themselves and hold different positions on wife beating in Sharia law, ranging from near prohibition to perfectly halal. The reality is that in Muslim countries, domestic violence is a common practice thanks to Islam. In Afghanistan, nearly 90% of women suffer from domestic abuse. In Iran, 66% of women at the beginning of their marriage have been at least physically abused once. In Pakistan, 80% of the women are reported to be subject to some kind of abuse within marriage. Up to 4,000 are burnt every year either by their husbands or in-laws. In Turkey, 80% of women have been victims of domestic violence and sexual harassment. Indeed, Aisha was right in saying, "No woman suffers more than the Muslim woman." Surah 2 verse 222 and 223 declares, "Keep away from women in their causes and do not approach them until they are clean. But when they have purified themselves, you may approach them in any manner, time or place ordained for you by Allah. Your women are a tilth for you to cultivate, so go to your tilth as you will." If that sounds like an allowance of marital sexual assault, well, that is exactly what it is. But it gets worse. Surah 23 verse 1 to 6, "Successful indeed are the believers, those who humble themselves in prayer, those who avoid idle talk, those who pay alms tax, those who guard their chastity except with their wives or those bondwomen in their possession, for then they are free from blame." Yes, you just read the words of Allah, giving the green light for masters to have non-consensual intercourse with their slave girls just like they did with their wives. And Muhammad, the role model of all Muslims, was famous for having his way with his slave girls. Even Allah commanded him to do so according to Surah 33 verse 50. "O Prophet, we have made lawful for you your wives, to whom you have paid their full dowries, and those bondwomen in your possession who Allah has granted you." In the hadith, it was clear that the Prophet didn't forbid himself from what Allah had made lawful unto him, especially when his wives weren't happy about it. One time, Muhammad's army was hesitant to have their way with their female bounty until a revelation was sent telling them to go ahead. All these are well documented, incredible Muslim hadiths on the life of Muhammad and his companions, but you don't have to take my word for it. Behold, renowned and revered Muslim apologist Daniel Hakikachu eloquently explaining why this is halal.
If a girl is any age, she can be taken as
a sex slave, right?
Yeah, as opposed to being left to die.
Of course, those are your options. You either sexually assault them or leave them to starve. There's clearly no third, fourth, or fifth option, right? And there is no better proof of this halal certified practice today than what we saw in Israel on the 7th of October. Hamas was following the teachings of Muhammad down to the letter, and Muslims were celebrating and chanting from the river to the sea. That was unadulterated Islam on full display, and how can you deny it?
Hitler knew how to deal with these people.
Even Mohammed Hijab posted on Twitter that sexually assaulting female captives of war is halal, and apparently these female captives desire to be violated by Muslim men. Now, I'm not saying that this applies to all Muslims and all Muslim men are sex offenders, pedophiles, and wife beaters. I'm saying there is nothing in Islam opposing such evil behavior. Instead, it is seen as lawful. And there is nothing about this that should be desirable to a Western man raised in a Christian home where love and kindness are taught. How can you reconcile the equal dignity of men and women under Christianity to women being like domestic animals under the teaching of Islam? Most Muslim women aren't submissive, they are oppressed. Nobody dresses like this whom an oppressive ideology hasn't conditioned. Granted, feminism has gone too far, but this is jumping out of the frying pan straight into the fire. See, Pro criticizes Catholicism yet knows nothing about Catholic doctrine.
I'm a bad Catholic, I don't know what to tell you.
She praises Islam yet knows nothing about Islamic teachings.
The women seem to submit more to their men.
And that's the trend in the West now, present both on the left and the right. Extremism drenched in a relentless, condensed obsession with ignorance. We see it on college campuses and in Candace Owens.
Yes, the question is about Candace Owens. I think her behavior during this has been disgraceful.
And I've probably lost 70% of my Muslim viewers, while the remaining 30 are probably fantasizing about beheading me, but the truth must be said. Islam is antithetical to Western tradition, culture, and idea of freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And please, I'm begging you guys, Biko, Ejim Chukwu na Ariono, stay away from Islam.